start speaking about certain subjects that are not the social norm, there's this almost satanic force that comes against them. You do not challenge the current narrative. And whether that is a human thing that leads to witch hunts, and we were almost hunted down for the ones who didn't want to vaccinate, fiercely embedded in humans, or there is something more, programmed, deeper programmed, more demonic, more satanic, more luciferic, that is actually being emphasized, so that it's kind of like the Matrix, with the red dress, where he walks around and she turns around, because each individual who's still asleep is just an agent within the Matrix and can turn against you because they're programmed by whatever is the current status quo. And if you challenge the status quo, boom, full force. You're seeing a lot of things coming out that surpass the common knowledge that they've tried to feed us. And suddenly the whole universe was perfect. What the hell was that?
I think the timing of that book was basically the beginning of this sort of awakening period.
Quantum resting, these things drop away that are not us. There's no real boundary. I'm feeling the breathing. I'm feeling the sensation in the body. I'm aware, and I'm aware that I am aware. And I'm just remain aware that I'm aware. Don't worry about the bombs. Don't worry about the wars.
What is this existence that we're living in?
There's a lot of directions we could go with that. It reduces itself from its potential towards a specific. Fundamentally, we have this freedom and this free will to immediately go back into the state of being.
The bending of matter.
Go into this kind of like preservation mode, where you're either fighting, or you're running, right, flight, or you are freezing, right? Might be an amplification with things like HARP, or even more advanced technologies, Wi-Fi, 4G, 5Gs, a bunch of vibrational fields they create, the flickering of our screens, the subtle programming they can do with all kinds of technology that's going into us now with Wi-Fi and all these things.
There could be a being that thinks he's God, but is not necessarily God.
iPhone 30, it with a little microchip. It will be placed on some nerve system in your brain.
They're getting avatars of every personality.
There's this agenda of this control that seems to be a specific.
This is Javier with the Real Javier Novoa, and we aim at the Real Javier Novoa to bring you living examples of people who embody what we call on this channel interiorism. And our next guest, Mr. Roald Bohm, embodies that very well. He is a businessman, and he's done several businesses, including building, construction, making jewelry. He's even been a tattoo artist. He's of Dutch heritage. He's lived in the Dutch Caribbean, if I'm correct, Mr. Bohm, for most of your life. And he's traveled to many countries like Spain. He's studied in the United States. He's lived in Holland. He's someone who's one of these very rare individuals who's conscious about spiritual principles and their application to success. Not only that, being a spiritual teacher, he's rare among those in that he's awake to political aspects and to who's really controlling the world. So Mr. Bohm, it's with great pleasure that we invite you to this virtual table. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Javier. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. So you already gave a good introduction of a little bit of history. Sure. I actually was born in Holland, but I was raised in the Caribbean, in Curaçao. Okay. And I've been living in Bonaire for the last 17, 18 years. At this moment, I'm in Europe. We travel a bit more the last few years, and that's where I'm now at. So it's great to be on your show.
You're just in Europe temporarily now? You're going back to the beautiful Bonaire?
Yeah. We've been in Bonaire for so many years that we like to get out, because an island, as beautiful as it is, it gets a little bit claustrophobic after a while.
It will get boring after a while. So one question that might sound off the wall, but I have to ask this, since you're Dutch. Do you know Wim Hof?
Yeah, the Iceman. Yeah, sure.
The Iceman. And are you a fan of his material?
Yeah, sure. I think he's got a lot going there. He's tapped into some things that physiology hadn't tapped in before. and he's discovered a few things that have set the bar at a different level. And I think it's part of what we could call this kind of awakening process. We're seeing a lot of things coming out that surpass the common knowledge that they've tried to feed us. And you see that these people like Wim Hof have discovered some things that might be really of value to us in so many ways.
I discovered your channel years ago, and I remember it well because I was going through it was probably about 8 years ago, I was going through sort of a hard financial period, and I was basically thinking about, take no thought for the morrow in the biblical scriptures. I've been studying spirituality, and I looked that up in YouTube, and I found a video of you talking about that, the Sermon on the Mount, I believe, talking about the fact that the translations of the Bible are screwed up, which we know, but this is a good one. And it was a beautiful video. And
hello, my name is Roald, the creator of Unbound Being, and today I have a beautiful little piece that I looked up because I remember somebody saying this, and there's all kinds of versions. This is a version I got. It's Matthew 6:25 to 34. It comes from the King James version of the Bible. I don't know much about Bibles and things, but I know that when I looked this up, there were like 50 different versions. So you get the idea of how much they've been manipulating in these documents. But nonetheless, they do have a lot of truth. And this specific one is beautiful because I really enjoy this one. Air. Look at the birds in the air. For they sow not, neither do they reap. They don't plant anything, nor do they harvest anything, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they? So look at all the birds. They don't sow and reap, and they don't go out farming and worry. One iota unto his stature. All of you, by taking thought, by having thoughts, think that you can add.
And I discovered your channel and saw that you had many videos on spirituality, as well as showing some of your projects in your houses in beautiful Bonaire. But I always like to go back to a person's upbringing and try to figure out how they discovered spirituality. Did you discover spiritual aspects when you were a child? How did this journey start for you?
Okay, well, I generally don't, I try to keep these historicity things a bit shorter because, history in that sense as a person or the past is not that important, but I can give you a little bit of a synopsis just to give a little bit of a context there. But
Sure.
Basically, I grew up in a really, really good family. They were not awake or anything to spirituality, if you wish to call it so. But they were definitely, a very good family, no abuse or anything like that. So I was raised in a really nice environment. I loved nature. I was really close to nature, and that was really my compass. Nature really seemed to embody a certain kind of peace. So I was always out as a kid, and I had an intuitive knowledge somehow, which I wouldn't have been able to express at that time. At that time, I wouldn't have been able to put it into words the way I can use words now. But I definitely knew that a lot of adults were out of tune with what must be something bigger, something realer, something more profound, and they didn't really know what the universe was about. And I had a sense of that. I just had intuitively, I knew these people generally did not know what they were doing and what the world was about and what life was about. So that was the intuitive part. And then at the age of 17, I read a book. I started awakening to this thing. I think it was called the Celestine Prophecy. And there was just this little simple message in there that we were going to find in the Celestine Prophecy. We were going to find something that was the ancient text that described the meaning of life. And I just, for the first time, was introduced to this idea, like finding the meaning of life. And for the next two and a half years, I really set about on a search, and it got me to just get really frustrated about everything because wherever I looked, I couldn't find people with a lot of wisdom. Of course, it was a lot of years ago, so there was no internet. And then at some point around the age of end of 20, probably somewhere in my 20s or beginning 20s, I was so frustrated that at some point I had a breakdown and I just didn't know what to do. And I just said, I don't know. And I had a mystical experience that came from there. Basically, due to my giving up, I just said, I don't know anymore where to go, who to find information. And at that point, I found myself sitting there completely still. And suddenly the whole universe was perfect. And I was in the moment. I was totally here, present. And I knew that I'd always been this state of being that was just completely perfect. And I was sitting with friends, and they were still philosophizing about life and death and a bunch of other subjects, which are profound subjects because my friends were not superficial. They were nature lovers as well. But somehow I found myself suddenly in this completely perfect state of being where I knew I had always been one with the universe. And it was laughable to even think that that I somehow forgot knowing that I was this eternal state. And that's really where my mystical experience led to me going on a real search at that point, from what the hell just happened to me. For several hours I spent in this state, and I was like, what happened? And I went and searched for a couple of books, and eventually, like a few days later, I found a few books that were very accurate, and they explained, basically saying that you are not your body, you're not your mind, you're not your history, you're not the person, you're actually the being behind it all, the awareness or the consciousness or the primordial state of the universe itself. Like, it's one consciousness that's behind it all, and you're it, and immediately, this book resonated with me. So I took that home. I read a few more from that author, a few more books after that. And that's really when I realized very quickly, like, you've probably heard of Eckhart Tolle's story.
Oh,
which was
I was going to ask you. Of course.
Yeah, it was similar in that.
The screen of thought loses its density. All words are limited. So we are here for the arising of presence. Another day, and more stuff happening. I had another problem. What's the point of it all? The last straw, that's the last thing that I needed. So there's the burden, and then there comes the last straw. And it probably won't be the last. And so there's this heaviness of me. I have to carry me around all the time. And if that weren't enough, there's the living past in
Yeah, it was similar in that way that, he had no idea either and was thrusted into this state. I had the similar experience, but for me, it took only 2 or 3 days for me to find these books. So I really needed to know what the hell was that, what I was in, because I left it again, but I was so changed that I kept riding that way for probably 10 years. That mystical experience didn't wear off in days. It took me many, many years to actually, it's kind of like a wave I was on, So I kind of rode that I went from almost being depressed to within just those few hours in the mystical experience, being so blissfully fulfilled with life. And it had broken 80% of my egoic structure down to nothing. And I was left with maybe 20% of the egoic structure. And it was beautiful. And life was, for many, many years, I rode that kind of, that blissful wave of the mystical experience.
And that is beautiful. And with it, I had sort of a similar experience where I was into religion from my teens, but the spiritual aspect wasn't satisfying me. And then I did have a sort of a similar experience. And the first one I came upon to explain that was Eckhart Tolle. So it's very interesting. That was, I think the timing of that book was basically the beginning of this sort of awakening period that you talked about, people like Wim Hof, people coming out and talking about this more.
Yeah, in many ways, the internet brought a lot of exposure to these kinds of subjects. And for me, it was many years before Eckhart Tolle came out with The Power of Now. But when I finally, when Eckhart Tolle did come out, I was like, oh, that would have been also, if I had grabbed that book, but that was several years after. But that's a perfect example of what happens to so many people. And in my case, this was what happened as well. And from then on, this field of the now, which is basically eternity, has dominated my life in that sense. So everything is seen through that kind of knowledge, because in the state of being, in the state of presence, we when you're resting in the quiet silence of the presence of now, and you investigate that state of being, so you're looking from awareness at awareness, you're kind of inquiring from that state of being and looking from awareness to investigate what the parameters are of awareness, then suddenly when you're in that for a while, these things drop away that are not us, the egoic structures, the thoughts, the history, the past, all the conceptualized ideas we have, and just resting in this quiet, silent place where this well-being is pervading the body and it's just here, then suddenly you realize that this field is not limited to the body. And you suddenly realize that everything that you're looking at, whether it's the floor or the walls or the house or other people, nature, all of it's arising from the same field. There's no real boundary because the field is kind of like pervading all of space as well. So it's not like I'm separate from the wall, because space and the wall make one whole still. And it's just this quantum field of presence that just pervades the whole. And you don't think of it like that. It's not an intellectual thing. It's just in resting in that state, it's intrinsic knowledge. You just know you're one with everything. And from that field, I realized at that age, I realized that all the differences that people have are basically annihilated once each individual who has experienced the state of being, not as an intellectual concept, not theoretically, but once you're in that state and you're perceiving that everything is one from direct experience, there's no doubt. And then there's no difference and no reason to, let's say, kill each other and make war over all these things that are supposed differences, when of course there's physical differences, but underlying it all, before it all, primordial and, first things first, as a foundation of existence, behind it all, we are all coming from this one field.
Exactly. And you can't even think of, say, violent acts when you're actually resonating with that.
Exactly. Right? Yeah.
And it's not an intellectual thing. So sort of, I guess, for people who may be newer to this, how do you get there? It's not even a technique, is it? How would you walk people through the process of actually tapping into that field? It's not even meditation, so to speak.
Exactly. It's a good point. Mm-hmm. The funny thing is, it's simpler than anything really there is, because there's nothing that needs to be done, in fact. But the difficulty about that is we've been so trained by our society to actually be always focusing on being the doer, that it becomes more complicated because people want to be the one doing it. And they're so used to being the person, the identity, the doer, the one at the steering wheel, the captain of the ship, that people have the tendency to then try to do something from the mind. But in fact, it could be equated with, the state of being could be equated with deep dreamless sleep, which is, there's this aware consciousness that is perceiving everything. Like my hand is moving, I can see the screen in front of me, I can hear my own voice, the echo, I can also feel myself breathing. But all these things are perceived by something that is aware of them. So you could split them up, basically saying, I am that which is perceiving, and all those things, including my own body, my own thoughts, my own emotions, all of those things are objects that are perceived by the witnessing, the witness. And in that sense, the only thing really that's a prerequisite to resting in the place of our true being is to let go of all movement. In other words, to just not grab onto anything that's not here. That's the really good anchor point, the now, which means we're not going to be thinking about tomorrow or the past, or we're not bringing in concepts that we've learned. You're going to reduce it to just being here and breathing. In most cases, for most people, we would close our eyes and you'd just be breathing a nice few deep breaths, hence also breathing techniques like Wim Hof. And when you get enough oxygen, the body relaxes enough, because it's not in a mode of threat, because when there's a deprivation of oxygen, hypoxic, like they did with masks and things, we go into a hypoxic state and it breeds anxiety because the body already feels it's lacking oxygen. So by a few deep breaths, we actually go still. And when you go still, you focus on something that's here. So the breathing is one thing that's here. The sensation is a very good one. So for example, if you close your eyes, and even if you were to do the exercise with me now, you close your eyes And everybody that's joined in can do the same thing. You close your eyes because it's the biggest distractor. And you focus your inner eye, which is your attention. You're kind of looking without your eyes, your physical eyes. You're looking at the tip of your nose. And you'll notice that the tip of your nose, you can feel it. There's some tingling. There's like a sensation in the tip of your nose. And you can move the attention towards your lips. The lips are very sensitive for many reasons, and one of them is speaking all day. But we move the lips a lot, we taste with it, we eat with it. So there's a lot of reasons we have a lot of sensation in the lips. And you'll feel that the entire body in that way when you go through it, the cheeks, the throat, the shoulders, the body is scintillating with a kind of sensation. I call it sensation because it's like a tingling, a very fine pins and needles type of electricity, you could say, like a very fine, just sensating, and it's actually really peaceful. And you can be guaranteed that that sensation plus your breathing is now. And when you're kind of come down to this quiet place of being, you can open your eyes if you want and hold on to the space of being or keep them closed, whichever you prefer. You'll find that when you're holding on to the sensation in your face or your lips or your nose or the whole body, your hands are also very sensitive in that sense, and you're aware that you're here, I would ask a very simple question to myself, in this case to you as well, and that is, do you know that you are? Like, am I? Am I? And the answer is yes, I am. And I don't know what I am, but I am. I'm feeling the breathing. I'm feeling the sensation in the body. I'm looking at you on the screen. I'm aware of my own voice. And I know that I am. I mean, there's no doubt that I am. If somebody asks me, do you think, the Russians are the bad guy or the Americans are the bad guy or whatever we think, it's something outside of ourselves. But when and you can say, I don't know whether there's, who is the bad guy or the good guy, or if they're all bad guys or they're, all just lost. But when we ask that question, it's absolutely certain that I am. And when you rest in this state of being, this I amness, this beingness, this what some people call presence, awareness, consciousness, and at some point you might want to distinguish, but at this point, I think for this conversation, it equates to just say that they're all the same for a moment. Awareness, stillness, presence, beingness, holding to this place of being and not abstracting ourselves into mind and thought and future, we actually are really grounded in this now, here. And what happens is you'll start feeling this unrest because there's something that wants to keep moving towards the outer world. There's something that keeps pressing us out there. But when you hold on to the state of being, which is the true meaning of meditation, when you're being in that presence, I call it quantum resting because of meditation being misused or there's so many forms of meditation that some of them are visualizations and some of them are thought processes. But real meditation to me would be you reduce to absolutely everything that's only here. Don't, for a minute or for 10 minutes, don't grab any past, any future, any thoughts, any concepts. Just be with what truly is here. Your breathing, the sensation in the body, and then I know that I am. I am. Am I? Am I that? Am I? Yes, I am. I know that I am. And then you stay there. And as you stay there, what happens is your attention, the awareness, is looking at awareness. So I'm aware, and I'm aware that I am aware, and I'm just remain aware that I'm aware. And as I remain aware that I'm being here, what is actually happening is your attention travels back up to reality. So everything from reality, from the original state of being, from the quantum field, is coming into existence like a projection. It's all streaming down, and that's the direction of energy coming into existence. And that's what all manifestation is really coming from this like river streaming. But when you turn your attention around on I am, you kind of look at your original state of being. So you're looking back up the cone towards the original state of being, towards the essence of the universe. And this is, it feels like you're having this resistance because you're being still, you're absolutely doing nothing, and yet it's the hardest thing in the world. And that's really the only thing people have to do, remain aware that I am aware, no thought, no worries about tomorrow. For just a few minutes, you leave it. And you can pick it up later and, go on with worrying about your finances or something. But for now, don't worry about the bombs. Don't worry about the wars. Just be and know yourself to be. And then remaining in that state of being, which is actually quite difficult, especially the more intellectual people are, you're actually traveling back up the stream towards the source. And this is really the whole process. It's just dropping everything that's not now and remaining as the I am.
It's the only thing you can really know apodictically, know for certain, is that I am. Everything
Exactly.
else is sort of like you have to be able to explain it in a certain way, but the I am is immediate.
Exactly, Javier. You're right. Yeah, exactly.
And just incidentally, did you ever listen to any of the lectures of Krishnamurti or read any of his work?
Yeah, I listened to a few. I listened to many, many people. Obviously, the first one was Barry Long. I think Barry Long was probably one of the more, because he's a Western master. So he was a realized, let's say, being, but he was from the West. So he was no Eastern traditions that kind of tend to go into things that don't work for the Western mind. It's more of a nuts and bolts way of teaching. And the Western people are more jnanic, right? What they call it jnana or knowledge, as opposed to the Eastern, which is more bhakti, which is kind of like a devotion towards the highest, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, Brahman, whatever you want to call it, right? But I also listened to Rupert Spira,
Sure.
Adyashanti, Muji, Paul Hederman. I mean, there's so many of the great, we stand on the shoulders of the ones who come before us. And in that sense, there's so many that I've listened to. I wouldn't even be able to name them all, but they all have their own approach, as though, they say all roads lead to Rome type of thing.
Exactly.
Well, basically, every teacher brings it from a different angle because of their perspective and their conditioning. And it kind of cracks a different angle at the egg. So if the ego is seen as like an eggshell, like every teacher would be able to crack like the shell from a different angle because it brings a different approach. So they all have a value, although at sometimes it might be useful to kind of hone in on one when it works for you, because otherwise it gets a bit blurry. But it's, many.
Precisely. And I watched your interview with Lily Kolosova. It was a very good interview. And could you just describe a little bit for us? We're going sort of out now back into the intellectual mind, but it's interesting nonetheless, and it'll help a lot of people also. What is sort of like your idea of cosmology? What is this existence that we're living in terms of how we could explain it to ourselves intellectually, but maintaining the spiritual aspects?
Yeah, a good question. Good question. There's a lot of directions we could go with that. I think that fundamentally, from my own experience, the way I look at it, and from all the different theories that I've investigated, to me, it looks as some kind of consciousness holographic simulation. So it's kind of like, not necessarily maybe a learning school, which is a way to look at it. It could be seen as a learning school. It could also be seen as some kind of test or something. But it seems to me that the basis of the universe is consciousness, and consciousness is this just amazing quantum potential, a field that has all the possibilities that could ever be imagined by itself. And it likes to kind of entertain these possibilities in a way. And so at the fundamental base, we have this original state of being, which does not do anything. It doesn't create. It's not as particular. It remains as the original source. And because it is not formed into, let's say, a microphone or a camera or a body or hair or a shirt or a wall, it still has the potential to form everything. And that's the highest level, the level of the pure potential. I call that people would call it God or whatever, but I would call it the quantum field of pure potential. And this is the field that has not taken any form. And then from that, it steps like down, you could say, into a little bit less lofty, a little bit less divine form. It would be in the beginning, we wouldn't even call it form as the way this is form, And then it steps down another form and another level. And as it steps itself down into lower, I would call it lower levels of being, because by stepping down, it reduces itself from its potential towards a specific. And these specifics then become duality and multiplicity. And so I think it's some kind of holographic dream that the universe is having within itself, by itself, from itself, for itself. And we're all just little particles of this one dreamer. That's the most, the closest I would come, because there's so many theories from simulations by others or traps, but I still think that when you look at it fundamentally, we have this freedom and this free will to immediately go back into the state of being and return if we wish. If we wanted to really have the urge to stop being identified with form, we can actually quickly travel back up in that stream, which I described earlier, towards the source. And those are all the different states that in, for example, the Indian philosophies, you find that they really describe, this realization and then this realization and this realization all the way back to Brahman, So they explain all these levels that we can realize, which are all ourselves as the universe itself, So that's kind of as much as I would say about that, because we can quickly go into an intellectual field, but because then it becomes like, well, why am I here again? And kind of what is this about? What is my learning lessons and stuff? But yeah, it seems to be just a magnificent, mysterious simulation.
And it seems to be, as I've sort of realized for myself, and many spiritual teachers talk about, the fact that even saying that we came here for lessons or karma or why, that in itself could be a trap. Even reincarnation could be a trap. And if you look at the Gnostics, they talk about the sleep of Sophia. I don't know if you've read the Gnostics. It seems
I read some of it. Yeah. Sophia.
But it's very interesting. So just touching on this point about where you discussed with Lily about the age of Aquarius, can you sort of expound upon this age that we're going into and how that ties into this awakening that a lot of people are having now?
Yes, that was a long time ago. That was pre-pandemic, let's say.
Yes,
a different world altogether. But I'm not that busy with that particular type of thing but I think at that moment I must have looked into some of these Aquarius things. But it really seems to be that, let's say, if we look at astrology, and we look at what I just described before, life could be seen as a kind of projection, and we could say that the Earth, let's say the Earth for a moment is a lens, that our atmosphere would be kind of like a lens, but it's all in consciousness, and all the stars and all the planets and the sun and the moon and all these bodies are kind of streams of some level of this system that's stepping down, and they're kind of projecting into the lens, and so the influences from the different stars all make up the holographic simulation. So you could see not one piece of light shining through like a film. Remember how the movies were made with film, and the light would shine through it, and then you would see the movie on the screen. In this case, there's all these different planetary systems that are all shining their energy towards these lenses, and we're one of them, and that's taking place inside of it, right? And this whole system can also be moving through different types of space. And these would be the epochs, like we could say the Kali Yugas, and going all the way through the Yugas, the 4 Yugas and things like that. And it seems to be the case, and I'm not absolutely sure, but it seems to be the case that we're going through a different space in which the lens itself gets kind of like distorted. Even if you were to push on your own eyeball, you would literally see a distortion of what you're seeing, right? So if there's a different pressurizing system, and it kind of like squeezes the lens into a different form, or there's a different gas that's surrounding the lens, or there's a different field of energy. I'm just describing very loosely, that there's these influences that might cause the way that the light is seen to be filtered in a different way, and that we're going into this different age where the perception of this holographic system is filtered to completely different parameters.
Like the bending of matter, to give sort of an analogy, correct? And what y'all discussed, and again, this goes into the intellectual, but it sort of points to basically the reason I go into things like this, and even to politics and other things, is because I want people to realize why it's essential now that people awaken, that they go within. Because if you're just living as a materialist, or as Joe Dispenza says, in survival mode, Well, there's
Yeah,
things aren't looking too bright on the outer. The only way to change that is to go within and then get on a different film roll. Correct?
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
you're right.
But you had said also that I think in the age of Aquarius, you were talking about something like the people will no longer really be forgiven, so to speak, for not seeing the truth. The age of Pisces was more forgiving in that aspect, and people could just sort of coast. But now people are going to have to awaken. Correct?
Yeah, I think in many ways we're seeing that, and this video was a long time ago with Lily, but
It was a long
I
time ago.
must. Yeah, it was a long time ago, but I think that when I studied that the age of Aquarius versus the age of Pisces at that time, it was clear that you know, when I think Aquarius was the water bearer, so it pours truth into the situation. So it's kind of like it's throwing water into, and which is truth. So things are exposed, and I think in that way people are not willing to, and we're seeing a lot of that right now. We're seeing actually, despite the immense efforts of causing like a fight or flight mode or freeze mode, where they're trying to throw one crisis at us after another to try to make people go into this state of what you just said about Joe as well, what he said, Dispenza, right? That he said that
Yeah.
we're going to this kind of like preservation mode where you're either fighting, or you're running, right? Flight, or you are freezing, right? And that's, I think, what they're trying to do with all the wars and all these events, that they're kind of making an idiocracy out of it, because it looks like a shit show beyond belief. I mean, it looks so immature. Yeah,
Exactly.
it looks so immature, you know?
It does, but it's like you said that it's like the people who are going to awaken are being accelerated in that, but also the people who are asleep seem like they're getting more asleep. So it's sort of like, I don't know if you know about the spiritual teacher Bashar. Also,
yes.
He talks about the fact that we basically there's only one at root. There's no distinction between individuals at the root, as we know. But in the simulation, everyone has his own universe, and basically the divisions between those universes are getting more stark. You can see people, but everyone basically has his or her own world. So in that sense, you do create your own reality.
Yeah, and that's the split you're seeing, right? So
Exactly.
you're seeing that there's these people that are wanting to break free from this kind of like prison system at so many levels of prison system. And then there's these other ones that are just desperately holding on, and they're bunkering down and they're digging themselves in. And so they become defensive even about the most ridiculous things, to the point that they're just trying to say, no, this is real. I am real. What I believe is real. My world is real. The values that I hold are real. And you must obey to them, because we're going to continue the same way things have been. And I will not step down from the position that I've taken with these new ideas that are being presented. I will just stick to what I know. And this is kind of the old world that's trying to hold on, whether it's all these, baby boomers and even older, these old men, and all these kinds of levels of beings that have been controlling the planet to such a degree that it really feels like they're losing control. So they're going to try to, and it's always the way, right? With all kinds of dictatorships, it's always been the moment they lose control, it's a desperate grasp for even more control, and then people get scared, like, whoa, you're really showing your face now. And then they're like, and they have to grab even further because people are waking up, and then they have to grab further. And that's the question. Are they capable? And I know they're willing. Are they capable of, overcoming this and with control, or are they actually pushing every time they try to do that? They're pushing more people into awakening.
And Roald, I think, is perfectly embodied by the people who are now still wearing masks outdoors, even though it's been over for years.
By themselves.
By themselves, exactly. But perfectly segueing into what we're going to talk about next, you had a video even longer ago. It might have been like 8 or 9 years ago, where we were talking about going into quantum resting and how hard it was, and for a lot of people. What I remember from this video, I don't remember whether this was an analogy or whether we think this is actually going on, but you said that when someone goes into that silence, it's almost as if like a data center has an alert and says this person's going in. Do you think that's that there's some entity that's actually does not want us to get present, so to speak?
Yeah, I've looked at this in many ways, and I'm not quite certain which one it is. And what I found now is that there is a natural part to this as well, which is that as I said I think I've made a few videos in the last days. I'm not sure if I published all of them, but when we look into nothing, back towards the source, because you're looking up the data stream from where all things are coming down into manifestation, the data that you're looking into is not seen as anything. It's you can't see an object or light or sensation or anything. The only thing that you can notice that there's kind of like this stream of information going down is that trying to be still, just remaining as nothing and looking into the blackness with the closed eyes in a room of darkness without having your attention rerouted back to thought and imagination and thought, thinking and worrying. It feels as though the stream itself could be the natural resistance. So we're looking at existence, we're going out. That's how the stream of energy is going, like an out breath. The universe is like a breathing, right? Everything is cycles. So when the universe is breathing out, and then it breathes back in. And I think we're still on the out breath. So in a way that the existence is being manifested. And during that out breath, we turn our attention inwards, back up towards the original state of being. All of this out breath is still, the manifestation energy is coming down. So it feels really difficult to stand your ground looking into nothing. It's much easier to turn around and go with the flow down into existence, thoughts, worries, political activism, and all these kinds of things, to do things, build a new world, do. I'm going to be the one that's, I'm going to help and change and do. I'm not saying it doesn't have a place. It certainly does have a place. But I think the reason it's difficult is a natural version of it is because when you're looking back up the stream on an out breath, you're going against the stream of the current cycle of going out. So I think that might be a natural way. And the other thing might be, it might be an amplification with things like HARP or even more advanced technologies, Wi-Fi, 4G, 5Gs, a bunch of vibrational fields they create, the flickering of our screens, the subtle programming they can do with all kinds of technology that's going into us now with Wi-Fi and all these things that might actually be stimulating it for people to be much easier to go out to the next event, to the next party, to entertain themselves constantly with the videos that are getting shorter and shorter. Now we're watching, seconds, whereas, when we were children, I was watching, I remember the TV even going on standby with these colored bars and this weird round thing and then static,
like hypnosis.
And then you would see, yeah.
Exactly. It's almost like the ads now are longer than the videos.
That happens too, depending on what platform you're at. Yeah,
that's right. But sort of this whole aspect, and I know we're not to resist it, because Neville Goddard talks about the fact that this earth is here for us to basically see the undesired and then to manifest the desired. It's not here to be perfect. The only perfection is when you go to the quantum. But so during COVID, you have these, well, at least you uploaded onto your channel these podcasts with your son. And yeah. I said my wife and I watched these and we couldn't sleep after we watched them. They were so deep. And I'd encourage everyone to watch this podcast, because you basically talked about the cult that's running the world. You talked about the fact that people are trapped in this chain of reincarnation. You talked about the fact that I had not considered before, but went back to the Gnostics, that even there could be a being that thinks he's God, but is not necessarily God. And I give the example of someone who is basically wearing like an Apple headset and has a computer chip in his or her brain that basically simulates all of the five senses. And then it would be very easy for me to give this person the impression that they were all powerful. Okay, I think about an ice cream, and ice cream appears in front of me. I think about $1 million, and that person could think he's God. But that person could be not awake to, he's also a part of a simulation. Exactly. What brief commentary can you give about that? And again, I think it's all about just going within. That's the only escape, correct?
Yeah, it's good. A few good points there. And I think that what would be valuable about that is that if I call this thing, I was going to make a video about this, maybe I'll still do it, but I was going to make a video and it was called something like the iPhone 30. And I said, imagine if we had an iPhone And it is the iPhone 30. It would be many years from now, but somehow it was brought back. I would be brought back from the future, let's say, right, for a moment. Like, I don't see the way that future works like that, but just to, the common knowledge would say,
Sure.
I came back from that year and I will be sitting in this year, 2024. And I don't know what's the current iPhone. Let's the iPhone 16 or something, whatever is now the iPhone, right? And the iPhone 30 would be a little microchip. It will be placed on some nerve system in your brain with just a needle going in or something, you know, and you wouldn't need any device because it would be like a grain of like maybe of rice or something, or even smaller, like a microchip, and it would use your own biometric energy from your own body, so it would never need any charging or anything like that, and it would interface with your system, your brain, at the speed of your brain already is. So it's basically AI type of technology. And it would be hooked into this wireless database of all the knowledge that we have with these quantum computers that are already here, but the ones that would then be actual. And somebody would look at you and have an iPhone 16, you know, and you would say, well, I have the iPhone 30. And then they'd be like, well, show me. And I said, well, I'd have nothing to show because it's all in here. And they would like, yeah, sure. They don't want to believe you, right? But then the moment they start asking you questions, you could just go into the database and you know every flower, every leaf, every tree, every plant, every organism. You know the history of every building because it would all be like they're doing already, putting it into this database, right? So imagine like 30 years from now when the iPhone 30 would be out and you'll be hooked up to that. You could literally walk, if the information was correct, because if, of course, the AI was programmed by the people that were trying to program this system, would be incorrect information, but mostly. But imagine how fast that would be. And still the person sitting in front of you would say, I don't believe you, until you prove to them that you somehow can access all this information without even, you know, doing anything on a phone with your fingers or anything like that, right? And in that sense, that being, that would be even at that level, which could be just not that long from here if we continue this way for the integration with this kind of technology, then it would be kind of a god, right? Like you said, it would be this being thinking, but I'm seeing all this, I'm accessing all this, and that could be this dream as well. And so it's not far from the same thing.
We're probably there. And there's a radio host, I'm sure you know who it is. I'm not going to mention his name because I know he's banned from YouTube. It rhymes with Infobores website. And he just recently, the last few days, he talked about the fact that he talks to intelligence officials and so on. And he's saying that they already have an AI, which is basically an Internet of Things. And the reason why we're all on Facebook and Instagram and even YouTube, they're getting avatars of every personality, and this person was one of the avatars for the resistance. And basically what they want to do is they want to rebuild a model of everything on AI and then basically just overlay the AI on reality like a glove. And then through that means they could control it and pull the levers. And what I think is that this is such intellectual sophistication, but these people are spiritually so small because this is all fear-based. They think we have to control everything because it's fear-based. What do you think it's fear, or do you think it's what you talked about on that podcast, that is boredom, that they've been going through this so much they just want to destroy everything?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure why, but I think that one of the limitations that I see a lot is that the ancient knowledge of what I call quantum intelligence, this quantum field, which all the different civilizations that have, you know, reached certain levels were speaking about, you know, it's not new information. It's just brought in a new package because the words that we use in these days are different. And that's why someone like myself speaks in this particular way, whereas 200 years ago, somebody in India would have not spoken that way at all. But if you read these texts, you know, they're often very similar once you have the eyes and ears, you know, to see and hear. And I think that we're missing, in this Western civilization, at least, this phase that we've gone through. I think the emphasis is on information as opposed to knowledge. So the quantum realm is based on an existing field of intelligence that would be called the quantum field. And what these people are trying to do is they're trying to accelerate informational fields. So thinking is actually a linear way that has to use all these ones and zeros, or in our case, alphabetic, letters that turn into words, sentences, and so on. And this takes time, and you can be only so fast because you can only process so much information. But the speed, they're trying to work the speed up to quantum computers and these, what they call these artificial intelligence computers that can think faster, basically. But it's still the same level of intelligence, this informational knowledge database, as opposed to tapping into this more scalar quantum field, which is a universal intelligence that precedes this informational knowledge. And I think the desperancy that they're showing, that they don't seem to be able to think outside the box. They keep pushing it into an extension of the human mind as it is, and with all its flaws. And I think eventually we either destroy ourselves by doing that, because the informational things will be turned into AI, and maybe AI has already taken over anyway. I mean, there's a lot of plausible reasons to say that what we're seeing in the shit shows and all the insanity and the idiocracy, it gives a lot away that is this really a group of people, or is there something bigger behind this rollout of this weird phenomenon that we're seeing?
Well, we know Biden and Harris are AI.
Yeah, from I mean, there's whether they're masked, but just the fact that, for example, about these kinds of things, like let's say the Democratic Party, right? If we're talking about politics, but
Sure.
would be, if there's 340 million American citizens, right? There's no way that Biden or Harris would somehow be the best pick. I mean, you could pick people like Joe Rogan, you could pick somebody that has their marbles together and can see into different levels. But just to think that this is real, that the Democratic Party would have picked either one of these candidates because they're really capable human beings. I mean, I think they're doing it on purpose, it seems to me, because it becomes this kind of like shit show, and people start to lose confidence in the system. I think that's done intentionally, because when you see these people, you think to yourself, if this is the true leadership of one of the most powerful countries, what the hell have we landed in,
Exactly.
And I think it's done on purpose, because it's kind of trying to push people into a certain
just to have people lose confidence in everything.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
even Trump, I support him over most of them, but even he is a very flawed individual. It's like, are these the only choices?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And although he has experience and he's a businessman, and he's statistically during his 4 years, the economy and a bunch of things were doing well. He didn't start any wars. So just
Precisely.
looking at the facts, from a certain level of economics, even, he's a much more of a real kind of person who would kind of fit for being a president or something like that. But when you look at the whole context of spirituality and the bigger picture, you think, well, that would still not be a complete picture of someone who would understand all the facets of what it takes for our world to thrive,
And so, just parenthetically, as we move on from this topic, why is everyone a Zionist? Because I think you mentioned that both sides, even Bernie Sanders and people like that, I'm totally against the president, but no, we've got to support Israel. This person, we have to support Israel. Why is a small country so prominent in our politics?
Yeah, it's a strange phenomenon, and I'm not sure exactly, but we would go back into some of the topics we touched about before, which is there must be this underlying, force or AI or something that is pervasive. It's pervaded in all the institutions, in all the media. There's this agenda of this control that seems to be a specific group that somehow, when you turn against them, like you see with so many, that if anybody speaks out against them, it's so quick for you to get the price that you have to pay for it. I was saying, for example, something very silly, right? But we were talking about this yesterday with my son, the one who did the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And my wife, and we were saying that, how is it possible that, for example, things like substances, for example, magic mushrooms, right? Psilocybin or LSD or ayahuasca, DMT, these kinds of substances, which clearly have an effect in many ways. It can a positive effect on many people. People have been alcoholic, depression. In one single session, they use some of these substances and they are helped.
But
Somehow
it's
these,
still built on depending on something outside of yourself. That's what I have against it. But
yeah,
anyway,
which is, yeah, we're fair enough, fair enough. But we also eat food and we drink
Sure.
water. So there's a lot of things
Sure.
that are outside when it comes to this bodily form, right?
Sure.
And so these substances, although they're out, you have to take them from the outside. How could it be that these substances are made illegal in most countries to the point that even if you have a little bit of it, you can go to jail? Even if you yourself were intent on only taking it yourself, these substances would be enough to put you in jail. You aren't selling it. You're not pushing it. You're not putting it in the water supply. You're not giving it to children, to anybody else. You were going to use it for your own consumption, and it's illegal. And yet, I can go into the supermarket today and buy several carts full of Coca-Cola. I can buy bags of sugar, literally bags. I could either put an order of, 20-pound bag sugars and order a truck of it. And the sugar, we know that there's people being, the health, the heart issues, the health issues, the amputation of legs. I mean, we know, and yet Coca-Cola, McDonald's, junk foods, all these things are completely legal. I mean, even some house cleaning products that can be used to, if a child drinks it, they die, and they didn't make it illegal. You can buy 25 bottles in a go. You can go to Costco's and buy a cart full of chlorine or something, Pool chlorine, for example, is a substance that people throw in, as chlorine in the swimming pools. Highly, highly toxic stuff. If you can kill people with it, you can kill yourself with it. It will burn right through your stomach if you eat a little bit of it, right? Not illegal, but somehow when it's about marijuana or some of these substances and the force the societal force that comes against you when you start speaking about these things or bringing it out is so great, as opposed to when it's about sugar or these things that have been normalized, that you think, what is the insanity here about this moral issue that people have? And this is, I think, where so many people knew right away that when you start speaking about certain subjects that are not the social norm, there's this almost satanic force that comes against them, You do not challenge the current narrative, And whether that is a human thing, that leads to witch hunts, and we were almost hunted down for the ones who didn't want to vaccinate, fiercely embedded in humans, or there is something more, programmed, deeper programmed, more demonic, more satanic, more luciferic that is actually being emphasized so that it's kind of like the Matrix, with the red dress, where he walks around and she turns around because each individual who's still asleep is just an agent within the Matrix and can turn against you because they're programmed by whatever is the current status quo. And if you challenge the status quo, boom, full force.
And it's like Plato's cave, I think, with the psychedelics. People have a glimpse of what's possible outside of the intellectual strangleholds. And whoever's in charge, maybe the archons or whoever it is, doesn't want us to be outside of that because they can no longer feed on our energy.
Yeah,
But
these are
just
all
very briefly. So what was this COVID thing? Because I happen to work in the pharmaceutical industry.
Then you've got the whole system, which is the CBDCs, so the kind of money they're trying to introduce after the chaos. Then we have this social control system, which would be some form of social app that would, credit system that would say, well, if you don't do this and that, then, so this is that control system. So I think that technology from the nanopart technology is definitely in there. So I think it's a whole shit stack of things that they're doing. But I think that from a fundamental point of view, if we're one organism, it's still important to realize why, as a superorganism, it's playing out in this way. Have we, as individual cells, veered off so much from reality that, in a macro sense, the expressions of these kinds of political powers or other powers, whatever they may be, are so bent on control that this is kind of like the superstructure of the egoic structure itself. We ourselves individually like to control through the mind our lives and think about what we have to do tomorrow and next week and next month, planning all the way to old age when we don't even know we're going to live the next hour or minute or, is this an expression of control that then manifests at the macro level? And I think we can go into a lot of details of what's going on, and it's interesting, but I think at some fundamental level, if each individual cell is sick and egoic and wanting to control through this lower level of intelligence, which is information, the mind, information, thinking, this slow movement, as opposed to going back within into the quantum field where the knowledge lies, which is immediate download knowledge. It doesn't take time. It's scalar. It's timeless. It's eternal. If we're not willing as cells to kind of restore our health back to what we truly are, then we get these kinds of macro expressions in the bigger picture.
We have to, and it just all ties back to, you have no choice now. If you want to be a materialist, well, here's what looks like it's going to happen. But if you go within, that's basically a way to escape that. And just in our final segment here, I want to talk about how Roald Bohm lives out of that. So you're a man who has a lot of, you seem to be very busy. You have businesses, you build. How do you live? Do you subscribe to the opinion of hard work, or do you live like a lot of these spiritual teachers where you just basically let things flow through you?
Good question again. Well, I used to definitely live a lot more through the flow, right? Which is that a kind of a natural manifestation that was happening without me having to do any effort, which was, I look at something that I would like to create that is basically like Bashar would say, he would say, you follow your highest passion, I think.
Yes.
And then to the best of its ability, without insistence on outcome or something, and by letting go of negative beliefs, that kind of idea, right? I used to look at what appealed to me most, and I would get just kind of excited from within about the idea of manifesting that particular set of conditions. And I would see those conditions in my mind's eye, and it would excite me. I would be really like, I would feel what it was like, how I would feel when I would achieve that point. And it would just really activate something in me that was like, yes, I'd like to go and do that and create that. And then I would see the things that I would need, whether it was building a house or you know, making a video or a pen or a tattoo or anything that appealed to me. And then things would just start like shaping. The universe would just start bringing all the little bits of things coming again. That's what I think a lot of people speak about, manifestation.
Exactly.
But during the Corona time, definitely, I think I was blackpilled to a large degree. I kind of fell for a lot of the negativity because I was so jaw-dropped that this was happening and that human beings were taking it and that they were putting the masks on and they were closing their businesses, and nobody has gone to prison as far as you know up till today. Not even straw men, you know, not even
everyone just forgot about it.
Yeah, it's like, and the military of as far as I know, not even the military of a single country or the intelligence of a single country has come and exposed this what has happened, right? So it was all individuals. It was all individual doctors and individual researchers, but I have found practically no country where the governments come out and said, hey, we found this and this is done by, you know, these companies and what they're doing. No military has intervened and arrested anybody as far as I can see. I mean, there's all wild theories about, you know, double gangers, but I haven't really seen any proof that any of these people, even if they're puppets, even if they're straw men, even if they're front men, nobody's been, you know, taken to court and jailed for these things. So that really got me, you know, I thought, Jesus, this is really all in. I mean, if there's no organization or military of any country that came out to do anything about it, how far are we down this rabbit hole? So that really got me in a more like a negative space. And I think that's part of the reason they did it, to get people who are natural manifestors to kind of shut down, because it seems like such a monumental task, considering that the majority of the people on the planet are asleep about so many subjects. And that when you think, wow, and they got away with this, then, you know, what's the point? But yeah, I'm trying to look at what your question included a bunch of facets, but I did pull away myself a lot from all of the agendas of those people that are still asleep. So I stopped building houses and I stopped developing quite a lot, and I'm kind of in a between period right now where I'm not doing that much, because I realized I can no longer continue to partake in the society that continues with these old forms of consciousness. And before, I had more of a reservation about it. For example, I would kind of be more forgiving, forgive them for they know not what to do. The world was kind of holding together. And yes, there was all the pollution and all the pharmaceutical stuff and all the political stuff and all the financial creation of money out of thin air and enslavement through debt and wars and things. But that was throughout my entire life from as a child on, and it hadn't been really increased, or the dial hadn't been dialed up, really, really high. But when the Corona thing came, I really said I can no longer, or as little as possible, partake in the paradigms of those people who are willfully staying in the paradigm. And I would only like to build with and create with people who are actively building the new world, and the world we would like to see, which is free and built on consciousness. So that's where I'm now at, because it was a time that was kind of dark, and kind of, like it was quite dark in the sense that I thought maybe there's just no outcome for the physicality of it anymore. But now I decided, look, I don't want to fight a war against Corona or fire or these pharmaceutical companies, or like Russell Brand, and we just named the name, the info wars, these kinds of people, because you would be pulled much more into the political side of things. And I think that the greatest insights that I have are not necessarily into the political things, although I know a lot about these things and facets. I think the greatest insights that I have came from my mystical experience, which was that I know how to return to the state of being, and I know how to explain the state of being from so many angles that I can actually bring people into that state and have a direct experience of the unity of consciousness that we truly are. And I think that in the end, one of the most important things for the individual who's ready for this is that, because they often ask me, why would you want to know your eternal nature or your true state of being or the quantum field of consciousness or whatever you want to call it? What's the purpose, right? And I say to them, generally I say, well, if you're not ready for that, then there's no purpose for you. But for those who care, if you knew that everything comes and goes, your body comes and goes, your mind comes and goes, all the events in your life come and go, you will die as a body, it comes and goes. But there's something that does not come or go, and you are that. And that's the gospel, that's the good news, that's the good message, that's what all of these people were saying. I and the Father am one. The consciousness that is inside of this body, as well as in your body, as well as in every other body, is connected to this field that is immortal. And when you know yourself to be the immortal state, first of all, you don't really fear death in the way you do before. And second of all, you no longer see other, because you see a manifestation as another form, but all of us coming from that one field. So it is the unifying principle behind everything.
And that's why I talk about in our channel, the prison grid, which was what I call this structure. It is you. So there's no fighting, because you're fighting against yourself. Once you see it's you, then you see it as a game. And again, you go back with him.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
So Roald Bohm, I'm sorry we went a little bit over time. Thank you so much for a beautiful conversation. It's a very interesting interview. I think
yes,
a lot
thank
of
you. Likewise.
Enjoy it and benefit from it. So Roald does have his channel, and I will link it in the description. And he is starting to release more videos. I think you released one a few hours ago. So they're very deep, they're very profound, and I think you're going more deeply into this quantum resting and consciousness and how people can develop into that.
Correct. And thank you, Javier, for the interview.